I was on steroids when I was younger and for a while. And
for how long?
On and off, maybe for 10 years, maybe, between like mid-'80s, Rocky, till about mid-'90s, I would say.
If you were a kid and grew up in the 80s and 90s like me, how could you not be inspired by some of the greatest action stars that we had? I mean, I remember Jean-Claude Van Damme, Chuck Norris, Sylvester Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Dolph Lundgren. He always used to play a villain, a bad guy, in all the movie roles, at least most of them. And most of the time, I think all the time, he lost the fight, right? Or the battle. But in life, recently, he had to fight one of the biggest battles he'll ever face. And you know what happened? He won. And it was cancer.
There is the day after my surgery. They took out that one tumor. It's about that big. Then they took the other two they found, and another 3 small ones they found. So 6 altogether. So hopefully it's cleaned out. If it dies, it dies.
And this is a wonderful story. And in a recent interview, he talked about his long 8-year battle with cancer that he didn't tell anybody about. And it's a very, very motivating story that I want to share with everybody.
They found a tumor, or they didn't know what it was, just a tumor in my kidney. And they took it out here in LA in 2015. But then they did a biopsy and it was cancerous. And then I did scans every 6 months. Then you do it every year, and it was fine, for 5 years.
So for 8 years, Dolph Lundgren was fighting a battle with cancer. And he hid it from the public eye. Nobody besides his family knew that he even had cancer. He was still filming movies, he was still working, but nobody knew he had cancer.
So you have the surgery, you wake up, you're told they actually removed 6 tumors.
Yeah.
And what happens from there?
There's a picture that I was going to direct and star in that was starting in the fall. The doctor called me when I was in Alabama, ready to shoot, and he said they found one more tumor in the liver. So I was like, oh, shit, okay. At that point, it started to hit me that this is kind of something serious. They did a scan to, prepare for surgery. And the surgeon called me and said, no, it's grown now. It's too big. We can't take it out. It's like the size of like a small lemon. So now, if they can't take it out, that means you have to do systemic therapy.
And the first doctor that he went to put him on a treatment, and none of the treatments and all the procedures wouldn't work on him. And they said he had a few months left to live. And he was preparing to go. He had a young new fiancée, his kids, everyone was getting ready for him to die.
He started saying things like, you should probably take a break and spend more time with your family and so forth. So I kind of asked him, how long do you think I've got left? And he said, I think he said 2 or 3 years, but I could tell in his voice that he probably thought it was less.
Did you think it was it?
I thought it was it, for sure. Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah, I mean, you kind of look at your life and going, have I had a great life? Yeah, I've had a freaking great life. I've led like 5 lifetimes in one already, with everything I've done, and so it wasn't like I was bitter about it. It was just like, feel sorry for my kids and my fiance and people around you. You know what I mean? Because I'm still a fairly young guy and fairly, active and so forth.
And then he said, you know what? Let me go get a second opinion. So he goes to a new doctor to get a second opinion. and they put him on new medication. They do new treatments on him. And he found a way to beat cancer.
In the midst of my, shooting these 2 movies and being kind of depressed, I decided, well, screw it, I might as well get a second opinion. So we get there and I see this doctor. We meet this doctor, Drago.
This legend walks in and he's so sick looking and completely absent from the whole visit. He's just looking the floor. And he was told that he has a few months to live. That's how we get challenged to see, can we find a different avenue to care for these patients?
If I'd gone on the other treatment, I had about 3 to 4 months left. I couldn't believe that it would be that radical of a difference, that within 3 months, it was, things were shrinking by 20, 30%.
How well do you recall sharing with your family when you had the positive news?
Yeah, I remember sharing it with them. Yeah, it was emotional because, even I remember telling even some of my good friends. Nobody wants to think the worst, but I think they did think, that it was over.
What's happened since then?
So 2022 was basically watching these medications do their thing, and finally things had shrunk into about 90%. Now I'm in the process of taking out the remaining scar tissue of these tumors.
And if it wasn't for that doctor and the second opinion, who knows where he would be now. And this story is a very motivating story, because a lot of times in life, we go through life and we see doctors and they say that we have, an issue, a problem. And even from my life, and I can go back 20 years and say, they diagnosed me with something that didn't exist. My father, they diagnosed him with leukemia. He never had leukemia until he went to a second doctor. So a lot of times, it's a lesson for us to not always listen to the first opinion and to always get a second opinion. Now, also, Dolph discussed in that interview about his past steroid usage.
Steroids, yeah, I tried steroids back in the 80s, 90s. I don't know if it has something to do with the cancer. Of course, it struck me as it could have had something to do with it.
Is that something you've really thought about?
I thought about it because you always think that you've made a mistake in your health, health care while you get cancer. Like, maybe it's only me, but you kind of blame yourself to some degree for it. But I was on steroids when I was younger and for a while. And
for how long?
On and off, maybe for 10 years, maybe, between like mid-80s, Rocky, till about mid-90s, I would say. But depending on the kind of movie I made. Mm-hmm. If it was very physical, maybe I'd do more, or, but it wasn't like I was doing. I heard of the real bodybuilders, how much they do. Like testosterone, you can do 150 milligrams a week, and it's quite a bit. That's maybe what I would do. But I hear guys are doing 1,200 milligrams a week, and anabolic steroids on top of it. I just stopped doing it because it wasn't really. I stopped doing movies where I took my shirt off in every scene.
And I want to credit him because a lot of times, our action stars are heroes. Van Damme, I don't think Van Damme's ever admitted to using anything. And he was actually the reason why I got into lifting weights, because he was such an inspiration to me. But, either they never said anything at all or they were very vague about it, all these guys. And you have to credit Dolph for actually getting into what he actually took during that time in the 80s and 90s, and for the period of time he was taking it for. So now another thing he talks about is growth hormone and how it links to cancer, and how he thought maybe it could have been the cause of his cancer.
I think maybe testosterone, there's some connection between testosterone therapy and HGH, growth hormone therapy, and cancer in some people.
Now, he didn't specifically say he used growth hormone, but by him talking about it, you could only assume it was part of what he was using back in the 80s and 90s. And he thought that it could have been linked to what caused cancer in him. And growth hormone, a lot of us in the bodybuilding community, we know about the side effects. But most of the time, they say it's only in high dosages. But for me, I always stayed away from it. I always thought, even because you guys remember Barry Bonds, he didn't use bodybuilding dosages of growth hormone. But look at his head size. Look at his bone size, his structure size. Everything in your body grows from growth hormone. All your organs. You have a tumor, it's going to grow bigger. Your nose, your ears, everything grows bigger. So I never believed in it, even in low dosage. And it's interesting that Dolph spoke about this, and we don't know the dosages because he doesn't discuss the dosages of what he used back then on the growth hormone as he did the testosterone. But this should be a reason for people to think twice about taking growth hormone. As I was saying earlier, you have to give credit to Dolph, because not many times, and you could tell just by the interview how truthful he was, not many of these action stars have admitted anything. And we always watched them and we wondered, what it is that they took to look that way, because that's what we wanted to do. And as I said, Van Damme was my hero. I always wondered, what it is he did. And you have to give credit to Dolph Lundgren for this, and you have to credit him because, like I said in the first line in this video, he may have lost in the movies all those fights to Rocky, to Van Damme, to everybody. But in life, he won the biggest battle. And now his fiancée, his kids, are going to have him for a longer time.